Hi folks. I wanted to make a couple of quick comments about the material that we're covering this week, which is that transition period, the 14 and 1500s, that moves us from the medieval period into what we consider to be the modern world, the one we live in today, in which the entire planet is connected, and people from the various geographic realms trade with each other, travel regularly all around the world. And of course, the past recent years have shown one of the liabilities of living in a globalized world, which is the fact that pathogens and pandemics can become global. But the first point I wanted to make was that when I was going to school, and I think there's a lot of literature that's still out there that tends to use the term age of discovery to talk about the process by which the peoples of Europe leave their sort of home borders and over the course of about a century literally discover every major land mass on Earth, circumnavigate the globe, and totally change the fortunes and fates of pretty much everyone on the planet in the process. When I was a student, the term age of discovery usually was pitched with a positive emphasis on sort of how wonderful this was. And as some of you already talked about this week in the discussion board, there's an awful lot of horrific and negative things that happen as a direct consequence of the age of discovery. But age of discovery is certainly a Eurocentric way of looking at what's happening. In other words, we're looking through the eyes of the Europeans, discovering other parts of the planet. You could just as accurately refer to it as the age of invasions, if you look at all the non-European people and what's happening to them, or the age of slavery, or age of genocide, or age of mass epidemics, if you're talking about the Americas. And so I think there is has been a strong tendency to try to play up this time period. Certainly when you cover it in K through 12, they tend to try to make it this sort of heroic and exciting chapter in American history. And there's an element of that I think is accurate, but I can remember professors and teachers talking about the audacity of the explorers, leaving the familiar and striking out into the unknown, and comparisons were often made between people like Christopher Columbus and the Apollo astronauts, that this was as dramatic a moment in world history when the Europeans crossed the great oceans and encountered new continents. When you look at the motivations behind discovery, you have to keep in mind that this was driven in part by economics, that granted, coming out of the Renaissance, there were people who were driven by curiosity to find out what's over the horizon, but I think that's a tiny percentage of the people who were involved in exploration and then conquest and colonization. I don't think that intellectual curiosity ranks very high, unfortunately. I think that it's more about money, which is something that I mentioned in at least a couple of the discussion posts this week. The age of discovery is triggered by the closing of land routes that had existed since the ancient world, connecting Europe with Asia, with, again, a Eurocentric term. People in Europe talk about the Near East and the Far East being further from Europe. So Europeans, since Roman and ancient Greek times, had been carrying on an indirect commerce over the Silk Road, or which is more than one road, it's a system of roads, with South and with East Asia. And in the 1300s, that corridor of trade in luxury goods is blocked in part by the collapse of the Mongol Empire, which had connected everything from Korea all the way to Poland, and the power of the Great Khan had kept the roads open for trade. When that ceases to be, and also when the Ottoman Turkish Empire closes its ports to European sailors, in part because the Europeans had been obnoxious. Italians, mainly from Genoa and from Venice, had had a long relationship of trade with the ports of Anatolia, what's now the coast of Turkey. But the Italians had been guilty of misbehavior. And eventually the Ottoman authorities, who did not need European trade, they were already rather wealthy all by themselves, they in effect told the Europeans to stay out. And so suddenly the ability of wealthy Europeans to get luxury goods from Asia is severed. And that includes things like silk, as in Silk Road, but also spices, porcelain. There's all these things that Europeans were not producing for themselves. And that helps explain why the Portuguese are sailing down the coast of Africa, trying to make their way around the tip of the continent to India. It's to get back into that trade with Asia. And so discovery and intellectual curiosity, they're certainly part of the story, but I think it's cold hard cash that's really at the root of it. Hope you've had a first good week. And we're about to head into the weekend, so have a restful weekend, and I'll talk to you folks next week.